maintained by sheep, not humans. The reason is that sheep keep the grass dense and, most importantly, compress the soil while walking around the dike. I mean, only the Dutch would come up with something as ridiculous as that. But hey, who am I to judge?
Olá pessoal, sejam bem-vindos a mais um vídeo desse canal. Nós somos cidadãos de terceiro mundo e nesse canal nós reagimos e aprendemos sobre o primeiro mundo. Nesse vídeo nós vamos reagir a como os holandeses conquistaram uma terra que não existe.
Portanto, aproveite a oportunidade, considere se inscrever em nosso canal, clique no gostei, compartilhe esse vídeo e faça mais sugestões nos comentários. E agora, vamos para a reação.
I want you to take a look at this map of the Netherlands. It's from the 1300s and it shows exactly how big the Netherlands was at that time. What's interesting is that rising sea levels should have caused this country to shrink by around 65% in size from what you see on this map. So here's a map that shows what that would look like. But interestingly, this is not what happened. If we fast forward 7 centuries and look at a map of the Netherlands today, it hasn't shrunk in size. Instead, it's grown in size by 17%. So what happened? Well, obviously they didn't go the traditional route by annexing land from Belgium or Germany, the only two neighboring countries to the Netherlands. Instead, they created new land and somehow saved all the land below sea level from disappearing into the ocean. So I had to figure out how they did this. But on that journey, I found out that the Dutch war with the ocean explains so much about the Netherlands, its culture, history, and why it turned out to be the country it is today. I mean, have you ever wondered why there are windmills in the Netherlands? Why there are dams in Amsterdam? Or why pretty much all tulips in the world come from here? Well, turns out all of these things can be traced back to the Dutch war with the ocean. So what better place to start than the iconic windmills that you see everywhere in the Netherlands? Now, you might be under the impression that these windmills have one purpose, milling wheat. But these engineering marvels were the cornerstone in the war with the ocean. You see, their main purpose wasn't to mill wheat, but instead to pump out water from one place to another, which is a key part in how the Dutch create new land. And the way it works is they begin by sectioning off the area they want to reclaim by making these barriers, also known as dikes. Then they would build windmills on top of these dikes that could draw the energy from the wind and use that to drain the water out of the enclosed area into the ocean, creating patches of land that lie beneath sea level. These are called polders. It seems simple, but the ingenuity of this method simply can't be understated. You'll have to remember they began using this method in the 1300s, and therefore they had none of the technology we have today. So, to accomplish their goals of beating the ocean, getting their land back, and saving their country from drowning, they had to come up with something brilliant, and windmills were the answer. And while windmills aren't necessary today, the Netherlands still has around 1,000 of them scattered around the country. And even though they've gone on to use much more sophisticated methods to drain water, the windmills are left as symbols that represent the long history of Dutch dominance over the ocean. But wait a second, what do they use this reclaimed land for? Considering draining out seawater from an area will leave you with land that is made up of sand, salt, and clay, which isn't the type of soil you typically want to use for anything useful like, say, farmland. So what do they use it for? Well, despite the composition of the soil not being suited for traditional farming, the Dutch have found a way to use this type of soil to their advantage. You see, it turns out that the seabed soil, with a mix of rain, sunshine, and clever crop rotation, eventually becomes extremely fertile, to one crop in particular. And that crop is flowers, most notably tulips. And since the Netherlands has numerous patches of land with this soil due to their land reclamation, flowers are big business in the Netherlands. In fact, their tulip exports account for 80% of the world's supply. Just think about that. 80% of the world's supply of tulips comes from one country.
Uau! Incrível, isso realmente é algo que surpreende, porque a gente vê a informação da construção dos moinhos, né, e a forma como eles expandiram esses territórios, mas a gente também vê um certo desenvolvimento econômico, né, a partir de algo tão simples que são as tulipas. E realmente impressiona como eles têm a capacidade de se desenvolver e ainda assim, mesmo que seja um país pequeno, ele não tem limitações para uma constante evolução do próprio país, inclusive em termos econômicos.
Verdade, eu percebo que a maioria dos países ricos de primeiro mundo são países pequenos. E isso só me confirma que são países muito bem planejados e organizados. E por isso tudo funciona muito bem neles. E isso realmente é incrível. E olhar como eles conseguiram, como a Holanda conseguiu resolver esse problema também é impressionante.
The Netherlands. There is simply no other place on Earth where the conditions for growing tulips are even close to being as good as the Netherlands. I mean, no wonder, it's the only country with such vast acreage of reclaimed land, except for China of course, but they use different methods to gain new land. But hang on a second. If you look closely at these fields, you'll see that most of them are covered in grass, not flowers. And when I first saw that, I became quite curious. I mean, why aren't they growing flowers on all of the fields? Or maybe another crop that is actually useful instead of plain old grass? Well, I found the reason, and it's cheese. Let me explain. You see, whilst flowers are certainly the most obvious crop choice for these farmlands, there is simply too much land available to grow them on. And since the Dutch already represent 80% of the world's supply of, say, tulips, the supply would far exceed demand had they grown them on all of their polders, which in turn would create incredibly low prices, making it unprofitable to grow tulips and flowers for the Dutch. So something else had to be grown here, and as you might remember, not that many crops like this type of soil, so grass was pretty much the only option. But obviously, grass can't really be consumed by humans, and therefore isn't that desirable to any of us. So in order to make use of the grass in a profitable way, the Dutch put cows here that would be happy to eat it and turn it into milk. The only problem is that milk expires quickly and isn't particularly profitable. So, in order to combat this, the Dutch began turning the milk into cheese, a product that lasts longer and has a higher selling price. This is where Gouda came into the picture. A beautiful Dutch cheese that is recognized by its sweetness and creaminess all over the world. And it quickly became one of the best-selling cheeses, making it a highly profitable product for the Dutch, which is exactly what they were going for. So, because of the extensive land reclamation the Netherlands has done over the years, they discovered their two most lucrative export categories, dairy products and flowers, by necessity. And that's truly incredible. And it shows the ingenuity of the Dutch. But the Netherlands is home to more than just tulips and cheese. Let's not forget about dikes. Lots and lots of dikes. The Dutch take dikes seriously. And no wonder. They are the only thing that keeps the 65% of the land that lies beneath sea level from drowning. Therefore, these dikes are no joke. It starts off with a core of sand that then gets covered with a thick layer of clay in order to provide waterproofing and resistance against erosion. Then a layer of crushed rock below the waterline is added to slow wave action. And then all the way from the bottom up to above the waterline, the dike is often covered with carefully laid basalt stones or a layer of tarmac. It's literally a fortress placed in the ocean in the shape of a line. It's insane the lengths they go to in order to protect their land. And I haven't even told you the most ridiculous thing about these dikes yet. You see, the grass that is on top of these dikes is maintained by sheep, not humans. The reason is that sheep keep the grass dense and, most importantly, compress the soil while walking around the dike. I mean, only the Dutch would come up with something as ridiculous as that. But hey, who am I to judge? They've been defeating the ocean now for multiple centuries and I'm still scared of swimming at the beach. They know what they're doing.
É impressionante porque o que eles fazem para realmente resolver o problema. Não é simplesmente para fingir que estão fazendo alguma coisa, mas é para realmente solucionar o problema e melhorar a vida de todos nesse país. Então, sem palavras.
Mas que incrível é isso. Eles usam as ovelhas para fazer a manutenção das gramas. Quem pensaria nisso? Eles, os holandeses.
And that's especially true when they created this, the closure dike, 90 years ago. It's insane. Just look at it. It's 32 kilometers long and it turned this massive inlet of the North Sea into a freshwater lake. But wait, hold on a second. How did it become a freshwater lake? Shouldn't it be a saltwater lake, considering it was previously part of the ocean? Well, yes, under normal circumstances it would stay as a saltwater lake, but Lake Yggdrasil, as it's called today, is connected to a river of the same name, and over time this river has repleted the lake with freshwater. And if you combine that with the fact that the Dutch continuously pump out saltwater, you'll eventually end up with a freshwater lake. It's honestly pretty unbelievable. And while there are some major environmental concerns by doing something like this, the fact is they've protected this area from floodings for almost 9 decades now. So it's probably fair to say that it was entirely worth it to them. Especially when you take Flevoland into consideration. An artificial island that's literally the size of Luxembourg. More fascinating though is the fact that it didn't exist 35 years ago. Yet more than 400,000 people live here. Imagine living on land that really shouldn't exist. I mean, it's kind of weird to think about. Although I'm sure the Dutch don't really think about it, considering they've dominated the ocean for so long and it's so closely tied to their history. Even their capital city shows major signs of ocean exploitation. Do you see all these routes? Yeah, that's canals, and all of them were created artificially by the Dutch. Why? Well, it's honestly pretty genius. Not only could they use it to easily transport goods as well as people to and from Amsterdam, but also inside of it. Something that was incredibly valuable in the 15 and 1600s. I'm honestly fascinated by all of this, and if you want to do some more reading, just search Delta Works on Google. Trust me, you'll be in for a treat. But that's everything for this video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
Meu Deus. Eu não tenho palavras.
Você tirou as palavras da minha boca, as palavras que eu não tenho, porque eu também estou sem palavras para isso. É incrível, é impressionante. Isso é algo que eu não tenho nem mais de onde inserir tantos adjetivos assim, tamanha engenhosidade dos holandeses.
Verdade, são estratégias muito, muito inteligentes e me impressiona muito como eles chegaram a esse estudo para chegar nessa execução. Então, é impressionante, realmente é um país muito bem organizado, com muito planejamento. E acho que é por isso que funciona tão bem, né?
Sim, inclusive a engenhosidade, a forma como eles utilizam de uma maneira tão inteligente o uso dos moinhos, as tulipas, o queijo, mas também o fato de eles transformarem um lago em água doce e também o uso dos canais para transporte de pessoas e para comércio. Isso é realmente incrível. O uso das ovelhas. Até esse momento o vídeo terminou e eu tô impressionado com isso. Vai ter que ser muito inteligente para poder fazer esse tipo de coisa.
Realmente os holandeses são gênios. Eles praticamente pegaram e fizeram do limão uma limonada, porque olha quantos benefícios. É incrível.
É impressionante. Mas essa foi a reação desse vídeo. Portanto, aproveite a oportunidade, considere se inscrever em nosso canal, clique no gostei, compartilhe esse vídeo e faça mais sugestões nos comentários.
Muito obrigada por assistir esse vídeo. Nos vemos na próxima reação.
Tchau!